Why, hello there, and welcome to this video. My name is Leah. I'm a new progressive YouTuber, and I have recently started doing Wednesday and Saturday shows where I talk about politics, big stories, cultural trends, whatever I feel like talking about, all from a progressive point of view. You probably already know what this video is about, but we are talking about Campaign Watch with Kamala Harris. So I've just been doing on my Wednesday and Saturday shows just like campaign updates for the Kamala campaign, because that is the big story happening right now. That will be the big story happening until we have the election in November, unless something really off the wall happens. When I first started this channel, I was doing like 4 or 5 segments, and I was trying to cover like multiple stories, and I was trying to do multiple videos every show, and I was losing a lot of sleep, and it was a lot of work. And honestly, I think it's just better if I do just a single video on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And then also that frees up a little bit of time for me, not much time to be honest, because it still takes a lot of time to produce a show. But it does free up a little bit of time because I've talked about wanting to make content about being transgender, about the, experience that I've had with HRT, stuff like that. So I want to talk about my transition and make content about that. So I will be working behind the scenes to try to put together some stuff. And I already have some good ideas. So I'm just sort of like working towards that right now. I think I've decided that I'll keep politics on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And then if I decide to do any videos about my transition or anything like that, those will just be randomly released, not on a Wednesday or a Saturday. I don't know what day they'll come out. It'll just probably be kind of random, but they will not be regularly scheduled like my normal shows. But yeah, with no further ado, I want to jump right into things here. I've got a number of stories I want to talk about with you, and let's jump into it. Okay, so our first story here is days before convention, Democrats haven't updated their party platform to replace Biden with Harris. The Democratic National Convention will be held in Chicago, and it's coming up here in just a few days. So a couple of our stories here are going to be about that. The Democratic platform, essentially a document outlining goals and policy positions the party supports, has not been updated since a draft was released July 13th, 8 days before President Joe Biden endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris. The committee in charge of compiling the platform worked for more than a year to draft it, including leaving room for key voices to comment and make changes earlier this summer. But the language set to go to the floor of the convention to be approved by delegates hasn't been modified since before Joe Biden left the race, and the rules body is not scheduled to meet to update the platform before the convention begins on Monday. Harris has not released a detailed list of her policy positions since taking over the top of the Democratic ticket, though her campaign aides have suggested she no longer adheres to some of the more liberal positions she took during her first run for president in 2020, including endorsing a ban on hydraulic fracturing. That doesn't sound right. I don't know what hydraulic fracturing is. The policy platform, which normally spells out a party's positions with heavy input from the nominee's allies, currently doesn't provide insight into her direct views on key issues either. The platform is non-binding. However, some Democrats criticized Republicans for failing to be more transparent during the RNC last month in Milwaukee. So that's the first piece of news that I just wanted to go over, is that there's a little bit of disorganization happening because of the crazy amount of changes that have happened over the past few weeks here with the Democratic ticket. Now, the only reason we're discussing this, to be totally honest with you, is because Kamala Harris is new to the race, and she has not outlined a detailed set of policy positions or things that she would like to do while in office for her presidency. Of course, while she's been campaigning recently, she has been talking about a few things that have come up, like trying to protect the right for abortion, stuff like that. Like, she has made a couple stances very clear while campaigning recently, but overall, there are a lot of unknowns when it comes to her policy positions. And actually, most people have just been assuming that Harris is going to basically copy paste what Tim Walz did in Minnesota for his governorship and take that platform nationally. Now, to be totally honest with you, I don't actually really think anyone cares too much about this. In the article, obviously, it said like, oh, the Democrats were being critical of Republicans for being kind of not very transparent about their policy positions and what they mean to do, which is arguable because like Project 2025 came out and that was extremely clear. And even though Trump has tried to distance himself from that policy platform, it is pretty clear that that's what they intend to try to do while he's in office. And not only that, but like Donald Trump has been president before, like he has sort of known policy positions. And although he does have a tendency to shift all over the place, depending on what the vibes are, what he thinks is appropriate for his campaign at the time, I do think that most people have a general idea of what Trump stands for. And if not just what Trump stands for, what MAGA stands for. But yeah, that's all from that article. I just wanted to talk about it because it is kind of true that like Democrats haven't really put forward defined policy positions for this race. And even though there's a lot of momentum behind Kamala Harris right now, if she were to put out a certain kind of platform, it could really hurt her chances in November. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about this because it's kind of interesting. I think during the DNC, we will see her lay out very defined policy positions. I think she will make her stances very clear at the DNC. That's the perfect place to do it. And she'll get very quick response from the party over whether, they're excited about that or not. So let's go ahead and move on to the next article. 7 News analyst predicts energetic, unified Democratic National Convention following nomination of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. The Democratic National Convention kicks off Monday in Chicago and will run through Thursday. Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz have already been nominated to the ballot by virtual roll call vote. Our political analyst predicts that this will be a vibrant and positive convention, much different from what would have been if President Biden had remained on the ballot. I think this is a really funny paragraph. I think it's a tale of two conventions, meaning the convention that would have been had President Biden not withdrawn from the race versus the convention that will be. I think the atmosphere at the Democratic National Convention is likely to be very energetic and energized. This will be a very unified moving forward. They will be very unified moving forward and optimistic. This is from Kevin Spiker, who's a professor of political science from Ohio University. I don't know who that is. He says that if President Biden had stayed on the ticket, the Democratic National Convention would have been divisive and controversial. Now, I know that that doesn't seem like the most interesting article or story to talk about, but I do think it is actually really interesting to think about like what the convention would have been like if Biden had stayed in the race, because approaching when Biden had dropped out of the race, we had a lot of people coming forward saying, hey, Trump's going to win. Like, this is not going to be a fair race. This is not going to be a toss-up. This is going to be essentially Trump taking the race comfortably. Like, Biden had no lead, and especially with the bias of the Electoral College, we need a lead in order to secure a victory. And even if we have a lead, chances are that the actual results of the election are going to be closer than a lead would imply. So a lot of people in the Democratic Party had sort of seen the writing on the walls. Trump had been leading comfortably for quite a while in the polls and stuff like that against Biden. And so before Biden dropped out of the race, everyone was pretty convinced there was going to be a second Trump presidency. Thinking about it now, I can only imagine that the DNC would have felt like a funeral. Like, can you imagine how awful that would have been going into the DNC while all that pressure had been built up against Biden for him to drop out? If he had just stayed in and been like, nope, I'm staying in, that would have been horrible. The vibes would have been far from immaculate. But now I think we can expect to see a completely different convention from the Democrats. I think we will see something that is very exciting. I think people will latch onto the enthusiasm of the race. I think that having announced policy platforms at the convention and stuff like that will get a lot of people behind a specific ticket with a specific platform. And hopefully it'll push forward the campaign with a lot of momentum so that after the convention, they can just keep campaigning, keep hitting the trail hard, keep working real hard, and we can move towards Kamala Harris being the next president of the United States. And now we're on to the next article. Chicago allows anti-Israel protest at DNC as Israeli American Council awaits approval for counter demonstration. An anti-Israel protest got the okay to go ahead during the upcoming DNC in Chicago, as a pro-Israel group remains in limbo for approval to stage its own demonstration. The Israeli American Council, a nonprofit organization that advocates for Israeli Americans, has yet to hear back on whether it will be approved to protest at the DNC, which starts in less than 2 weeks. Anti-Israel groups, meanwhile, have already gotten permission for a march on the DNC near Chicago's United Center after the group sought a First Amendment lawsuit against the city for attempting to restrict the demonstration. The IAC has filed 2 applications with the city to hold a protest. The first request, submitted in mid-June, was rejected because it would be a direct interference with a previously planned permitted activity or public assembly that would create public safety issues. So the city instead offered the IAC to hold its rally in a public park on the last day of the convention, with the group rejecting the offer because it was too far away from the United Center. So I wanted to talk about this article because I saw this story covered by a bunch of different sources, and it was really misleading, some of the ways that this story has been represented by the media. So as we saw in the article, the facts of what's going on here are quite clear. Both groups, the pro-Israel group and the anti-Israel group, applied for events in the city, and both of them were rejected. The anti-Israel group put forward a lawsuit essentially saying that this is First Amendment privilege, like they have the right to protest, and so they are allowed to protest because they took action like that. And the rally for the pro-Israel group has been rejected, and they have reapplied for that. But what's misleading about the article is that it doesn't really mention that like the city initially denied the protesters the right to protest. The way this story was covered by a lot of sources kind of made it seem like the protesters were just allowed immediately without any rejection to do their protest, while the rally goers were denied access. That's just not really true. Both groups were denied access, and then the protest group fought really hard in order to get access and do their protest. So there's not too much to go over there. I do think that it's good to see that there will be protests in Chicago. I think that this is an important moment. This is an important place to have these protests. I think that if the protests are big enough, it'll be a good opportunity to show a lot of Democratic leadership how much people care about this issue. And maybe, just maybe, it'll put enough pressure on Harris that she will put like moving for a permanent ceasefire as a part of her policy positions that she announces at the DNC. Now, she has already stated that she supports a ceasefire and that she wants to move towards peace and a two-state solution. But obviously, being the vice president, she doesn't have a lot of power to do anything directly. Like, it's all up to Biden and what he wants to do right now. But this is a huge issue for a lot of potential voters. All right, I want to go ahead and move on to the next story. So on my last show, we talked about how Harris and Walz spoke at a union event and how the UAW had endorsed the Harris campaign. And we also talked about how a lawsuit has been filed against Donald Trump by the union group due to the fact that like he admitted to union busting during that like live interview with Elon Musk on Twitter. But the article I have for you today is powerful United Auto Workers Union pledges $1.5 million to help Kamala Harris, taking aim at Donald Trump. The United Auto Workers leadership is aggressively backing the Democratic presidential nominee, with the union announcing the launch of a digital and field campaign to take on Donald Trump this November and promising an all-out effort to elect Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States. UAW is also pledging $1.5 million to the Democratic National Committee, and that's on top of a labor lawsuit it's filed against the ex-pres for comments he made in a viral Twitter Spaces interview with Tesla CEO Elon Musk. The charges relate to a short exchange in which Trump told Musk, "I look at what you do. You walk in and say, you want to quit?" They go on strike. I won't mention the name of the company, but they go on strike and you say, "That's okay. You're all gone." Musk's response was a simple "yeah," but that was enough for the union to file federal labor charges against the pair. Employers need to be held accountable in this country when they break the law. UAW President Shawn Fain told CBS, "It's a federal right of workers to go on strike. They cannot be fired for that." Fain carries considerable political clout in the Wolverine state, which is home to 134,000 UAW members and 300,000 auto workers. And he's more outspoken than ever in his opposition to Trump. It's difficult to discern how individual members will vote in November, but both Trump and Harris are courting this politically divided demographic in Michigan, a must-win Midwestern state. Still, the powerhouse auto union's top brass has stood fiercely opposed to Trump and his candidacy, drawing the ire of the former president, who has called for Fain to be canned. "The leader of the United Auto Workers should be fired immediately, and every single auto worker, union and non-union, should be voting for Donald Trump," Trump told the RNC committee audience last month. I hope you like my Trump impression, by the way. And then they mentioned that the GOP actually had a union leader, the Teamsters leader, President Sean O'Brien, at the RNC, which is actually just a huge slap in the face to like union workers, because Trump is super anti-union. So a union leader being for Trump is like a union leader being against themselves. There's not much to talk about here. I'm just excited about how dedicated Harris and Walz seem to be to the union side of things. Like, Joe Biden supporting unions is probably one of the best things that he's done in his presidency. And if we continue that energy and that momentum, we could bring unions back in a big way in this country over the next 8 years. And if unions come back, that could be huge. We could see the wage gap close. We could see more paid time off for everybody. We could see insurance improve for everybody. There are many reasons why we want to see unions come back in this country, because it's in the interest of the billionaire class that we don't organize and we don't fight for our worker rights. So now I do have one last article to show you, and then after that we have a video to go over, and then that's all I have for you today. This is a really short article. It just says dead heat in Pennsylvania. A new Emerson College poll in Pennsylvania finds Donald Trump just ahead of Kamala Harris in the race, 49 to 48%, with third-party candidates on the ballot. 47% support both Trump and Harris, respectively. 3% support Robert F. Kennedy Jr. No other candidates received above 0.3% support. Why do we care about this? Because it's an incredibly important state. We need to win this state, and so this polling is really important. But what I actually noticed, and what I think a lot of people are noticing, is that Robert F. Kennedy is actually more of a spoiler for the Republican ticket than he is for the Democratic ticket. Now, this is incredibly funny, and I probably should substantiate these claims, but I've been seeing a lot of talk about how RFK Jr. was essentially just like an RNC plant, like he was a Republican plant to try to spoil the Democratic Party, because a lot of people wanted to try to pull away from the support on the Democratic ticket to shore up support for Donald Trump. But this has actually just come back to bite them in the ass, because now RFK Jr. is pulling more support away from Donald Trump than he is away from Kamala Harris. And there's nothing that I love more than watching the Republicans have their plans blow up in their faces. So the gap has been closed in Pennsylvania, and they are essentially dead heat tied in that state. It's incredibly important that we win that state. So I really hope that there's a lot of campaign, a lot of energy, a lot of stuff going on in that state that helps kind of shore up our numbers and try to make this race a little more in our favor. We have to keep in mind that like while Harris is leading in quite a few polls now and she's gaining ground and she's closing the gap and she's taking the lead and all this stuff, it's very exciting, but this is still a very close race. And we have to remember that Harris started as the underdog in this race. So like she needs to fight for her lead. And then even then she needs to fight to maintain that lead. And even with that lead, as we discussed with the Electoral College and stuff, we need to have that lead in order to ensure that like this will be a close race. You know, if we have a toss up due to the way the Electoral College works, it's actually a little bit in the Republican favor due to the way that like that's all set up. And I don't know if you have seen these numbers or anything, but there were analysts that looked at the 2020 race and they found that there were like some states came down to like 10,000 people or less voting. And that's like 2 people per precinct or whatever. Like is like very small amounts of people decided the race last time. And we had record numbers of people come out to vote. So like we need to keep in mind that like this is going to be a close race, even if in the polling Harris is taking a decent lead. All right, so that's all I have for you in terms of articles. That's all I have for all the serious stuff. So we're going to move on to a fun video that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz put out very recently. A lot of people saw the recent Donald Trump, Elon Musk Twitter Spaces event thing, and it was essentially just Donald Trump rambling and doing campaign stuff and talking for like 2 hours, while Elon Musk essentially just said, yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're so right, sir. Yes, sir. And I think that that demonstrated that like this is not a normal conversation. This is not a normal relationship. The power dynamic there is super weird and icky. And so almost seemingly in response to that, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz took time out of their busy campaign schedule to sit down and have a conversation. And that's what we're going to listen to. Okay, I may pause this. I may not pause this. I don't really know. I haven't really watched the whole thing. I watched like the first couple minutes and I was like, oh, this is so good. I want to cover this. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump in.
I talk about it being halftime in America. We're a touchdown down. And I kind of like the idea of being a little bit behind.
Well, I'm looking at Coach Walz right now. I'm looking at Coach Walz.
Like I have white guy tacos and
What is
like
that?
black,
Like mayonnaise and tuna? What are you doing?
pretty much ground beef and cheese.
That's
and,
okay. Do you put any flavor in it?
No.
Oh.
Here's the deal. No, they said to be careful and let her know this, that black pepper is the top of the spice level in Minnesota, you know.
I'm the first vice president, I believe, who has ever grown chili peppers.
Well, trying to expand
We'll
my
figure that-
my food knowledge.
You know what? We've got some cantaloupes. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
So, I
I
called
was
you,
hoping maybe
Tim.
we wouldn't have to.
I called you, Tim.
Yes.
You didn't answer, Tim.
I know.
What happened?
The most important call of my life. It popped up, and we didn't recognize the caller ID, and it went to voicemail.
Hi, this is Jim. I'm not able to answer.
There you go.
Responsible. Thank you.
Hey, Tim, it's Kamala. I really want to talk to you.
It is an amazing privilege for me. Also, I'm excited. I just want to be part of the excitement that you're generating.
Well, we're
So
doing it together, buddy.
It's fun.
We're doing it together. How have these last couple of days been for you?
I can see where the energy comes. America is a hopeful country.
Indeed.
People are excited.
In every one of those groups of thousands, sometimes over 10,000 people, you've seen exactly who we are as America.
Yeah.
People from
I just want to mention before we move forward with the video that like she's not lying about her crowd sizes. She doesn't feel the need to lie or exaggerate the size of her crowds. So, you know, that's all I'm going to say about that.
Yeah.
people from rural areas, urban areas, of every stripe and size and background. This is who we are as America, and we're
Yeah.
all in it together.
Yeah.
And in this campaign, the only way we win is to keep the pedal to the metal for these next many, many days that we have. So, Tim,
Yeah.
what's your relationship to music?
Yeah. For me, the transformational piece of music was Bruce Springsteen's The River,
Okay.
which is a journey. You know all the tracks,
Yeah.
and I'm that guy. My first car, it's the summer 1980, been saving up. I buy a 1973 orange Chevy Camaro, got an 8-track player in it.
Oh, wow.
Previous owner left Bob Seger's Night Moves in there. I listened to it and it's kind of the soundtrack of my life of Detroit's own Bob Seger. But what's really great about this is I have a 79 International as my car. It's got an 8-track player in it. I have the very 8-track to this day.
You're kidding
No,
me.
and no, but how about you?
I grew up, so all these albums here, I mean, Aretha, my mother had every Aretha album, and like our Christmas gift to my mother, her birthday gift was always like, what's the latest Aretha Franklin record?
So it's on vinyl in your house as a background.
All of it.
Wow.
All that and Stevie. And then Miles, and my dad loved jazz, and so it was Miles, it was Coltrane. One of my personal favorite musicians for when I was younger was Prince.
Oh.
And of course from your estate.
Yeah.
And
I'm not gonna lie, Kamala Harris has pretty good taste in music. I'm a huge jazz fan. I love jazz a lot. And so it's cool to see that she also has appreciation for that music.
he, in fact, I'll tell you, so my husband Doug and I'm more of a hip hop girl.
Yeah.
He's more of Depeche Mode.
Oh yeah. Oh, but at the same
but
time.
yeah, I'm sure you
no,
like
of
the same
course.
music.
Of course.
But Prince, in the Venn diagram of things, Prince, he and I love the same, because, talk about how Prince was with that guitar, man. I almost know by heart every one of those songs.
I feel like a trip to Paisley Park is going to happen here if the staff
It's on my bucket list, I'll tell you
good.
that. Tell me about your dad and his influence on you.
Yeah.
He served our country. You have served for our country for so many years.
Yeah. I was 19. My little brother, I think, was eight or nine when he passed. He was a chain smoker, just addicted. They got it, but Korean War era, and that generation of men, pretty stoic. After he died, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She became our rock, and now she had to go out and get work because the medical bills broke her, and Social Security. And Social Security survivor benefits. We're fine pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. We had no boots. That's the boots.
And it's survival,
We paid
literally.
it back. It is survival. We all paid it back. So programs that are just fundamental to keeping people from dropping into poverty, but to live with dignity. You keep talking about that.
We got to help people get through a hard time. We can't have a country and policies that let people fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
I love what you have done with your life. You were coaching a high school football team that was winless.
Yes.
And you came in, and so they were clearly the underdogs.
And
what happened?
Yeah, it's a team, and I had great coaches with me, and we were friends, and we buckled down. And look, I was a fairly big school, but nobody wanted to play because they hadn't won. And this group of coaches said, first and foremost, we gotta build the team. We gotta go out and find people. So we invited them in, and I'll be honest, the first year we did not score a touchdown until the last game of the year. We got shut out in every game. My high score until the final game was my defensive tackle because we got a safety in one game. 2 years later, those kids won a state championship. That school has won several more since then after we left. You build culture. You build winning.
Right.
People want to be a part of it. And that's the excitement. That's the excitement of what it can be.
That's how I feel about our campaign.
Yeah.
Our campaign is the underdog campaign.
Oh, yeah.
And with our joy, we also have to understand that we're still up against some forces
Yes.
that are trying to divide our country. It pains me the kind of division and the stoking of divisions that has taken place,
Yes.
right? And when we can remind people and create a space for everyone to come where they see each other
That's
and
the
say,
magic.
hey,
They're
we're all
getting-
in this together.
It almost feels like everybody's coming out of their house after a blizzard and, a Minnesota reference, and you shovel out, and then you start talking to your neighbors.
Yeah.
How was it the last couple days or whatever it might be? They're re-energizing, and they're looking for their neighbors. We keep saying,
That's
keep talking
right.
about the promise of America, and we say, take care of your neighbor.
In the face of a stranger, when you're looking in the face of a stranger, you should see a neighbor, right?
Yeah. I'm about crying on this when you talk about, look, a girl from Oakland, California, and a guy from out in Nebraska
Right.
on there. And the number of people I watch just kind of nod and break into a smile, this exploiting the differences, it can't last. I talk about it being halftime in America. We're a touchdown down because a lot of folks, it's easier to tear things down. It's
Yeah.
easier to divide than it is to build. But once you start that momentum, once we come out and where we're at right now, people want to be part of something that's winning. They want to be part of something that's good, and they want to be part of something that everybody can be a part of. And I kind of like the idea of being a little bit behind.
Well, I'm looking at Coach Walls right now. I'm looking at Coach Walls.
Did you always know you wanted to be an attorney?
My parents met when they were active in the civil rights movement. Now, I grew up around a bunch of people that were marching and shouting for justice. And some of the heroes of that movement were the lawyers, Thurgood Marshall, right? They understood how to translate the passion from the streets to the courtrooms of our country. And they believed in the Constitution of the United States and the principles upon which it was founded. And that's where they then, in the courts of America, reminded us of the promise, right? And the ideals of our country, including equality, freedom, right? That's why I went to law school. But the other reason is when I was in high school, my best friend, I learned, was being molested by her stepfather. And when I realized what was happening, I told her, you have to come live with us. I called my mom. I have to tell you, Tim, it was the first time that I realized how not everyone can take their safety for granted.
Yeah.
And what we should all feel as a sense of responsibility to protect people from harm.
Yeah.
So that's why I decided I want to be a prosecutor.
Wow.
And as a prosecutor, I prosecuted homicide cases. I prosecuted a number of different types of cases. But
Sorry, I didn't mean to pause or anything because it's a really great conversation. But look at this photo. That is so, like, she looks like a bad bitch. I'm not gonna lie.
as a prosecutor, I prosecuted homicide cases. I prosecuted a number of different types of cases, but I specialized in child sexual assault cases. And one of the things I did was create a whole unit dedicated to focusing on children who are being abused and to ensure that they have dignity in the process and justice. There's so much work that we still have to do to make sure that children have a voice.
For me, that's kind of with me. Get in as a teacher.
Yeah.
It's about the kids and wherever you teach.
Right.
Once I had my own children, it became so clear to me, and I think it made me a really good teacher.
Yeah.
That child who came through the door was somebody's most special thing in their life.
Absolutely.
Thinking of a parent dressing their little one up and sending them off to school so proud of them, I wanted to come through that door and just lift them up, that sense of service.
And
It's
it's great to
interesting,
be in
two different
Detroit.
parts of the country, two different lived experiences, but all coming to that same goal of everybody
Yeah.
getting a fair shot.
Well, I have to tell you, Tim, even though you and I grew up in different parts of the country, you remind me of the people I grew up with. Hardworking folks, plain speaking,
Yeah.
people who know the difference between right and wrong
Yep.
and care, love thy neighbor in the most authentic and true way.
Yeah.
Those are the folks I grew up with, and I know that's who you are, and I'm so glad we're doing this
I'm
together.
proud to be with you.
So that was the video, and I'm not gonna lie to you, I had to like choke back some tears there. Like that made me pretty emotional, especially right at the end. It was just such a normal conversation where like you could tell that two people actually really care about something, and that's very engaging to see people talk in that kind of setting with that kind of feeling. So I think just having that video as a comparison between the way that Walz and Harris interact versus the way that like Trump interacts with literally anybody, it's just really stark. Like I think we get a really clear picture that like the Democratic ticket are two normal people who care, and the Republican ticket is a dictator wannabe psychopath. Like this just really drives home that like the Republicans are just weird. Like they're just super weird because the Democrats can sit down and their ticket can have a conversation that's completely engaging, normal, interesting. There's shared emotions, there's passion, there were so many things happening in that conversation that I have never seen Trump do in a conversation with someone else. Like, I don't even know if I've ever seen Trump laugh other than just like at the expense of other people. So I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. I actually really kind of hope they do more of that because that would be kind of cool to see if they did something more regularly where like they sit down and they have chats and they talk. And actually one thing I wanted to mention from that video is that like there were a lot of really cool comments in the comment section talking about how people loved that video. And one thing that someone said was like, Kamala Harris should bring back fireside chats. Like she should do that. I think that every Democratic president should have been doing that. But she should definitely do fireside chats and have those moments where she can sit down with people, once a quarter or whatever, and just like talk about issues, policies, international affairs, like whatever's going on. And I think that would be incredible. Like if her and Tim Walz could like do it together or something like that, that would be so cool. But yeah, I won't beat that video to death with analysis. I feel like there really isn't like a lot of deep analysis to do there. That was just definitely a super wholesome, feel good video. And I'm still thinking about that picture of Kamala Harris because she looked like such a bad bitch. And that's going to bring us to the end of the show. If you watched up until this point, I have to give you a big thank you. Thank you so much for giving my channel a chance. And if you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for coming back and continuing to support my content. I'm trying to push to my first 100 subscribers. And if you want to be a part of that journey, it would mean a lot if you would hit the subscribe button to get notified about when I drop my shows on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And alongside that, if you wouldn't mind dropping a like on the video and leave a comment down below, let me know what you thought, especially about that interview. I'm really curious what people are thinking and how they're feeling about that interview between Walz and Harris. But yeah, that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I will be back with another video on Wednesdays. So until then, please do me one little tiny favor. Just stay hydrated.